I spent 4 years studying finance at university, and tariffs were always considered a dangerous word.
Tariffs are actually, you've got a lot of experience with them. They're an act of war. Over time, they're a tax on goods. The tooth fairy doesn't pay them.
But to be honest, I was never presented with the other side of the argument.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary today is the word tariff. It's more beautiful than love.
Tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us.
Depending on who you listen to, either tariffs are a stupid concept that will wreck the economy and aggravate a potential disaster, or it's going to bring America back to the dominance that it knew 50 years ago.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. It's going to be a day that you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days.
The last time the world experienced something like this was in the 1930s. Trade wars escalated into armed conflict and eventually the Second World War.
This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
Trump has put his tariffs all over the place. Dave, how much are you down right now? 7 million. I'm down 7 million bucks.
These tariffs will result in lower prices for Americans.
No, prices will be higher 10 years from now and 20 years from now and 30 years from now.
We are going to get the best tax cut in history, paid for in large part by tariff revenues.
The Republican Party, which has branded itself as the anti-tax party for a century, is now imposing the most massive tax imaginable.
Write this down, text it to your friends, commit it to memory. Coming out of it will become the strongest, most robust, long-lasting American economy in history.
I mean, if these tariffs are fully implemented, it's going to push the U.S. economy, the global economy into recession.
The only question, will tariffs save America or end up ruining this once great nation currently at the top? To understand tariffs, you need to understand the other T word, trade deficits. The reason the tariffs have been issued in the first place is predominantly down to this.
The trade deficit.
Trade deficit.
Trade deficit.
Trade deficit.
Many people do not know this, but Warren Buffett wrote an article 22 years ago on this exact topic, tariffs and trade deficits. You might think that he wrote on how dangerous tariffs are and we should never use them in the first place. Well, you might be surprised. He wrote, "I'm about to deliver a warning regarding the US trade deficit and also suggest a remedy for the problem. Our trade deficit has greatly worsened to the point that our country's net worth is being transferred abroad at an alarming rate. To understand why, take a wildly fanciful trip with me to two isolated side-by-side islands, Squanderville and Thriftville. On each island, everybody works 8 hours a day, which means that each society is self-sufficient. Eventually, though, the industrious citizens of Thriftville decide to do some serious saving and investing, and they start to work 16 hours a day. In this mode, they continue to live off the food they produce in 8 hours of work, but begin exporting an equal amount to their one and only trading outlet, Squanderville. The citizens of Squanderville are ecstatic about this turn of events, since they can now live their lives free from toil, but eat as well as ever. To the squanders, it seems harmless. All that the thrifts want in exchange for their food is squander bonds. Over time, Thriftville accumulates an enormous amount of these bonds, which at the core represent claim checks on the future output of Squanderville. A few pundits in Squanderville smell trouble coming. They foresee that for the squanders both to eat and to pay off the debt will eventually require them to work more than 8 hours a day in the future. But the residents of Squanderville are in no mood to listen to such doomsdaying. Meanwhile, the citizens of Thriftville begin to get a bit nervous. Just how good, they ask, are the IOUs of a shiftless island? So the thrifts change strategy. Though they continue to hold some bonds, they sell most of them to Squanderville residents and use the proceeds to buy Squanderville land. And eventually, the thrifts own all of Squanderville. In effect, Squanderville has been colonized by purchase rather than conquest. Can you guess which country in Buffett's scenario is Squanderville? This is an analogy for what's happening in the USA right now. A problem in the media today is each outlet has their specific biases on how they write a news story. Take, for example, the news story when Trump first introduced the global tariffs. The Independent, which leans left, wrote, "Donald Trump liberates Americans from their retirement savings with tariff gamble." Real Clear Politics, which leans right, went with, "Trump's tariffs will bring good jobs back to America." It's the same story, but completely different takes on how the tariffs are going going to impact America. If you are not careful, you can get emotionally manipulated into believing a certain agenda, which is exactly why I use Ground News. Their app and website shows you the biased distribution of a source, how credible the reporting practices are, and even who owns them, so that you can understand that news isn't just reported, narratives are crafted. So I got my viewers 40% off the same unlimited access Vantage plan I've been using. Just go to groundnews.com/Cooper or click the link in my description. But I've been loving their bias comparison tool, which shows the key points that the left-leaning outlets emphasize and the points that the right-leaning outlets highlight. This helps me get a clear understanding of the different narratives getting pushed, so I get a more objective viewpoint. So go to groundnews.com/Cooper to subscribe and get 40% off the same unlimited Vantage plan that I use. You can also scan the QR code or click the link in the description. It's just $5 a month to stop letting other people's agendas control how you think. But back to what's happening in America right now. Every year they are selling a piece of their country away through consistent deficits.
You are giving up claim checks on our country in exchange for having more consumption now than you're producing in this country. So I do think that there's levels of trade deficit that bother me. We could all quit working, and we could hand little pieces of paper to the rest of the world, and they could keep sending us food, and they could send us autos, and they can send us all kinds of things. But eventually they have claims on all our wealth. So we do want to have policies where the overall trade deficit does not get out of hand in relation to GDP. And I've been arguing that for a long time.
Warren Buffett wrote, "So what does all of this island hopping have to do with the US? Simply put, after World War II and up until the early 1970s, we operated in the industrious thriftville style, regularly selling more abroad than we purchased. In the late 1970s, the trade situation reversed, producing deficits. Since then, however, it's been all downhill, with the pace of decline rapidly accelerating in the past 5 years. Our annual trade deficit now exceeds 4% of GDP. Equally ominous, the rest of the world owns a staggering 2.5 trillion more of the US than we own of other countries. Some of this 2.5 trillion is invested in US bonds, and some in such assets as property and equity securities." Remember that Buffett wrote this article back in 2003, and he was concerned that foreigners outside of America owned $2.5 trillion of America. So that's bond, that's land, that's stocks. So 22 years later, I wonder what that number is now. How much of America's wealth is owned by foreigners today? Google, I need your help. How much of America's debt is owned by foreigners? The US currently has $36 trillion in government debt. $7.9 trillion of that is foreign ownership. The largest foreign owner of this debt is Japan, the second largest is China, and then third is the UK. So $7.9 trillion of debt owned by foreigners in just bonds. That is just one form of foreign ownership. Another form is land. Foreign entities own about 40 million acres of US agricultural and forest land, which equates to about 3.1% of all privately held US agricultural land. Then you have stocks. According to the Department of the Treasury, Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, foreign investors own 17% of US equities. The total market capitalization of US stocks is around 50 trillion. 17% of 50 trillion is 8.5 trillion in equities owned by foreigners. If we add all of that together, the total assets owned by the US is 34.5 trillion. The liabilities, aka how much other countries own of America, is 54.3 trillion. The difference is 19.7 trillion. Foreign ownership now is $19.7 trillion. That 2.5 trillion that Buffett was worried about 20 years ago dwarfs in comparison to what it is today. The problem is 8 times worse. And Buffett actually kind of predicted this at an annual meeting in 2005.
More and more, the rest of the world is owning part of us, and we are going to have to service that ownership either through interest if they took it in IOUs or in some other way. And it can go on a long time. But if it goes on a long time, the world will own a good bit of us, and our children will be paying one way or another for the fact that we got to consume more than we produced. And I have a feeling that the idea of America paying tribute to the rest of the world because of the overconsumption patterns of a previous generation, I don't think that's a particularly stable scenario.
That is the core of the problem. Decades and decades of overconsumption with constant deficits, which has resulted in foreigners owning a decent chunk of America. As Buffett says,
if it goes on a long time, the world will own a good bit of us, and our children will be paying one way or another.
That begs the question, well, what is the solution? This brings us to where we are today.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
The president's solution to the problem addressed in the previous chapter is the 6-letter word. But I wonder if Warren Buffett agrees with this. Back in that article that he wrote in 2003, he actually gave us his solution, and this is where things get surprising. Warren Buffett wrote, remember that this article is in 2003, the time to halt this trading of assets for consumables is now, and I have a plan to suggest for getting it done. My remedy may sound gimmicky, and in truth it is a tariff called by another name, but this is a tariff that retains most free market virtues. We would achieve this balance by issuing what I call import certificates, ICs, to all US exporters in an amount equal to the dollar value of their exports. Each exporter would in turn sell the ICs to parties, either exporters abroad or importers here, wanting to get goods into the US. To import $1 million of goods, for example, an importer would need ICs that were the byproduct of 1 million of exports. The inevitable result, trade balance. From what I now see, action to halt the rapid outflow of our nation's wealth is called for, and ICs seem the least painful and most certain way to get the job done. He is essentially advocating for a tariff, but done in a subtle, less provocative way. Who would have thought Buffett advocating for a tariff? Instead of tariffs, it's just done a different way through ICs. His idea is, for every dollar of stuff America exports, we get a certificate. If you want to import something into America, you need to buy one of these certificates. So if a US company exports something like wheat, airplanes, or software, they get a certificate. If another company wants to import something, clothes or electronics, they have to buy a certificate. This is good because we can only import as much as we export. Exporters get extra income by selling their certificates to importers, and trade becomes naturally balanced without new tariffs or complicated trade deals. It's kind of genius because it rewards US companies for exporting and incentivizes them to export more, aka work and sell more. It makes importing more expensive, so US consumers and businesses think twice about it. And it's market driven, the government sets the rules, but businesses trade the certificates freely. Yes, it's a tariff, but done in a softer, less confrontive way. The problem is now the tariffs have been done in, let's just say a completely different fashion to what Buffett says.
China, we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. European Union, they rip us off. We're going to charge them 20%. Vietnam, we're going to charge them 46% tariff. Japan, very, very tough. We're charging them 24%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%.
With tariffs being done in a more extreme and forceful manner, the potential consequences are quite big. They're actually more bigger than you think.
It's counter to the interests of us, it's counter to the interests of China, it's counter to the interests of every country in the world. I mean, the world thrives on trade, and we would not have the economy, nor would China, nor would the rest of the world have the economic well-being that they have without a lot of trade. Everything intersects in the world, and it depends who gets retaliatory with us or with them, and it's easier to start it than it is to stop it. And the effects would be huge if conducted on a major scale over time. The very fact that it's sort of a nuclear threat is what brings people to the table. So, I mean, that's the way that many play the game, but you don't want to have too many nuclear threats out there because someday somebody may feel they have to fulfill one.
The nuclear threat is the one that I am particularly concerned about. Personally, I can deal with a recession. I've got some cash on the sidelines. I think the world as a whole can handle a recession too. We've got a lot of wealth and maybe right now we're a little bit entitled. However, a nuclear catastrophe we cannot come back from. I first want to talk about the potential recession threat, and then we're going to get into the nuclear threat, because how do tariffs enable a nuclear threat? How does that make sense? Okay, so there was this article written about how Ray Dalio is worried that Trump's tariff war could spark something worse than a recession. Dalio said that right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. If you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging existing power,
If you take those factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive. How that's handled could produce something that is much worse than a recession, or it could be handled well. Tariffs. It's a desire to bring in tax revenue from that. It's a reality that we would like to build manufacturing and jobs here. How that's done, whether that's done in a practical way, whether that's done in a stable way, whether that's done with quality negotiations, or whether that's done in a chaotic and disruptive way that produces great conflict, makes all the difference in the world. Right now, we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession.
Okay, so how do tariffs lead to a recession? Let's think that through. At the heart of it, what is a tariff? Warren Buffett, please explain.
Over time, they're a tax on goods. I mean, the tooth fairy doesn't pay them. I mean,
a tariff is a tax imposed by the government on foreign goods. The government gets more money and the consumer has to pay more money if they want to buy the item. This normally results in less consumer spending because prices are higher. Businesses' profits decrease because their input costs increase. So what do? They reduce hiring and they slow wage increases to try and cut expenses. They also delay or cancel investments in expansion or innovation due to a less stable economic outlook. The stock market, which hates uncertainty, starts to get very volatile and investors don't know what to do.
7 million. I'm down 7 million bucks in stocks and crypto.
And then, maybe worst of all, other countries decide to respond with their own tariffs, so American exporters suffer too. All of this can cause the dreaded R word. But a recession is by no means the worst outcome that you can see in a trade war. It's time to talk about the N word, nuclear.
everything intersects in the world, and the effects would be huge if conducted on a major scale over time. The very fact that it's sort of a nuclear threat is what brings people to the table.
How on earth can tariffs possibly be a nuclear threat? I mean, it's pretty obvious how tariffs can cause economic turmoil, but nuclear? Surely that's a bit of an exaggeration. Commonly, it's thought that you can launch a nuclear strike at the click of a button. One click and that's it, an entire country is gone. While the process to launch a nuclear strike involves a few more checks and balances in America, in other countries it's easier to set one off. We have seen examples of this in the past, where in Japan, Hiroshima, around 140,000 people were killed with radiation, burns, and injuries. In Nagasaki, 40,000 were killed instantly, and the bomb flattened a huge industrial zone, wiping out entire neighborhoods. Both of these events happened 80 years ago in 1945. The problem is today, with technology being so much better, nuclear bombs are more powerful. Some say in a worst case scenario, they can wipe out the entire human race. And I was looking into this. A single nuclear bomb cannot do this. It's not powerful enough even with today's technology. But if things turn into a nuclear war, then you risk humanity. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime right-hand man, put it best.
I can hardly think of anything more important than future close collaboration between the United States and China. And you're talking about the two most important nations in the world going forward. And I think it is very important that we like and trust one another and have very good relations.
I basically believe in a lot of trade because I want two countries with a lot of hydrogen bombs to be trading happily with one another instead of posturing the way we are with Russia.
It is much better for China, the USA, and any major nuclear threat to be reliant on each other with trade, working together and growing, compared to working separately and fighting. If we both need each other to keep our quality of life, we're hardly going to want to nuke the other country because we need them. Also, if we trade with each other, we form relationships and we get to know one another. We know know that they are real people just trying to get through life with families and hopes and dreams, and it becomes hard to form a narrative to nuke people that we have come to know. That's one reason why we might want to keep happily trading alongside each other without major tariffs. Now, there are some obvious caveats to that, like the trading should be done in a fair way, you shouldn't steal trade secrets, and you shouldn't use currency manipulation to gain an advantage, but ultimately we should try keep trade free, or else we could risk that worst case scenario. But the last time I checked, trade is not free, so it begs the question, what happens next? We are now left in some ways at the whim of the decision of one man. A man who I think we can say does things his way. Now, some people might add that this is a disaster of a recipe, but we are missing one thing. What is at the core of President Trump's character? What has he done his whole life? Longer than he's been a politician, longer than he's been a reality show star, longer than he's been a branding tycoon, longer than all of this, he has been a deal maker. Pick up one of his books and you can see that Donald Trump is all about the art of the deal. He has his own very unique way of getting a deal done, and sometimes it involves, well, stirring the pot. This time though, the deal that we're talking about is not just about developing a high-rise building or a reality TV show contract between just two parties. This deal was for world trade, nuclear threats, and it affects literally everyone. If things are handled wrong, it could end in disaster for every country and every human. Will he be able to strike a deal and find peace between all parties in a way that is fair, or will it end in flames? I don't know, but I think he can.